So I read a few books in June and July, and I wanted to do my wrap up, quick reviews, let you know what I thought about them. I had a pretty good time overall, some 4 and 5-star reads. I had a read along. I found a new favorite book of all time. Can't wait to talk to you guys about it. Thank you for joining me. My name is Theo. If you're new here, maybe consider subscribing if you like book content and stuff. Otherwise, yeah, let's get right into it. The first book that I read in June actually turned out to be my favorite book of all time, my favorite standalone novel of all time. I have a favorite fantasy book of all time, and that is Storm of Swords, and that's part of the series. If I consider my favorite book of all time, standalone novel, not fantasy, it's a little bit more speculative fiction, that one is Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. This copy was gifted to me by a friend of mine, and I loved it so much that I went out and bought the first edition hardcover to have a nice copy of what I think now is my favorite book. It's really exciting because when people used to ask me what my favorite book was, I didn't really have an answer. I found it so interesting that people could have a favorite book or a favorite color or a favorite food. I just don't work that way. But this book, I think now, as of today, is my favorite book of all time. This thing is basically set up as a murder mystery. A boy and his father in southern Alabama find this body and this car. This is like page for chapter 1. The murder mystery is woven throughout the whole thing, but at the heart of it, it's one of the best coming of age stories, particularly from the point of view of a young boy, that I've ever read and that I think is probably ever written. This is such a beautiful story. I got emotional reading it. I had super nostalgia reading it. It's just one of the best stories and one of the best written books that I've ever encountered. The prose is eloquent. Robert McCammon has such a way with words. His style suits me perfectly. I just flow with his prose and I love reading his work. One of the things that Robert McCammon does so well is his character work. There are so many compelling characters. You just love to follow everybody. The chapters are set up as kind of vignettes following different people, not like point of view chapters, but just it weaves the different characters together in a very satisfying way. And his atmosphere, his imagery, his world building is exceptional. This isn't a huge, expansive world. This is a small town in the 60s in Alabama, but it feels so lived in and real. I think it's a fictional town called Zephyr. It's such a good time being there. You can smell the smells, you can hear the sounds, you can basically just completely imagine yourself there. It's a beautiful story told through the eyes of a child and kind of touches on the magic in the world that is perceived through, by youth, through growing up. And it's such a good coming of age story. Like I said, huge nostalgia when reading this one. I might just save some thoughts for a dedicated review down the road. I don't really know. McCammon is starting to become a favorite author of mine. So I think I'll leave it there for now, because again, I might do a dedicated one here. But if you're looking to start Robert McCammon, maybe pick up Boy's Life. Swan Song is the other one. They're very Stephen King-ish. If you like Stephen King, I find it hard to believe that you wouldn't like Robert McCammon. I think there's a lot to enjoy there. And if you like something more speculative kind of horror, I would go with Swan Song, post-apocalyptic kind of world. This one is more the coming of age story that was woven through it without the horror aspect to it. There's a little bit of magic throughout. Again, is it magic? Is it not? Is it simply the perception of how things are interpreted when you're younger? I'll leave it up to you to decide. It's a beautiful story. The ending is perfection. I could read that over and over again. Brought tears to my eyes. I recommend Robert McCammon. The next one that I read in June was Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles. This is a myth retelling, historical fiction, kind of romance fantasy twist on the story of the Iliad and Achilles and the lead up to the Trojan War. Very important piece of literature and history, and it was handled with such care, such respect. She's obviously knowledgeable. She has degrees. She studied ancient Greek. I think she's taught it. You can just tell she knows the content so well, and her twist was refreshing. The characters were compelling. She has a glossary with all the gods and the kings and the ancillary characters that are just very fun to follow. It's a love story at the very heart of it, of Achilles and his friend Patroclus. I think in the Iliad, it's his cousin actually. This love story is a bit of a twist, and I thought it was done beautifully. It's really impactful. I was a little bit emotional with this one near the end, and I thought it was incredible. I was super impressed. I was kicking myself throughout this whole thing for having left it on my shelf unread for so long. I had it next to Circe, and I'm excited to try that one too, because she was a hit for me. I gave this 5 stars. a damn near masterpiece, and I think everybody should read this one. If you like romance, if you like fantasy, if you like Greek history, if you like historical fiction, if you like mythological retellings, standalone, short, sweet, great book. Then I picked up a Brandon Sanderson book because it's been a while since I read a Brando Sando, and I picked up Elantris. I have this nice, like, I don't know, 10th anniversary definitive edition that I've seen making the rounds. I've had it on the shelf for a long time, wanted to read it for a long time. I was worried that going back into an author's catalog, the writing wouldn't be as good. I've heard people crap on this one a lot. I really liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars, maybe 4.5. I don't know. Goodreads is weird. But I really enjoyed it. It was a really good story. The world building is great, and you can see those ideas and that talent even back in the day. I think this is his first published book. It's really, you know, all there. Brandon Sanderson is there. It's just a little bit less polished and a little bit less nuanced, I think, but it's really good. Again, it's pretty short. It looks a lot shorter than it is. It's actually not that short. It's like 550 pages. The pages are just really thin in this one. The story is basically about this city, Elantris, that falls, and it used to be occupied by these beings, these majestic, like godlike beings with magic. And the city falls all of a sudden. I think it was like 10 years ago in the book or something. And the people that lived in Elantris and all those people with magic kind of become these corpse-like creatures, and they're almost like zombies, and people are like afraid to go. They lock up Elantris. They kind of like seal it in, and they're like, ooh, like no one wants to go in there. From what I remember, the people that get transformed into these beings, these like zombies, go through this transformation. I forget what it's called, the Shroud or something like that. They turn into, you know, this type of people. And so when that happens to someone randomly, they get locked into Elantris because they're like, that's where these gross people go to just like die. They basically can't die. They just chuck food in there once in a while and lock them up, and that's kind of where they stay. I don't want to give too much away. Again, it's easy to spoil where this is going. It was a little bit predictable, but I found it to be entertaining enough. I had a really good time with it. There's a lot of themes explored in this one too, like slavery and political revolution, emancipation, and that kind of stuff. It was really well done. I can see the early glimpse of the popular Brandon Sanderson that we have today. It's just a little bit less polished, but I had a really good time. I would urge you to try this one. I don't really think it matters if you read a ton of Brandon Sanderson and then come back to this one. This is, a lot of people like this one, and then a lot of people say it's their least favorite. I still think if this is your least favorite Brandon Sanderson book, that's probably fine. It's still a solid 3 or 4 star book for most people probably. So because it's short-ish and it's a nice standalone, I think he's writing more in this world, and it is a Cosmere book. There are going to be tie-ins, I think, but you know, for all intents and purposes at the time of recording it, this is kind of a standalone. You can read it as a standalone, and that's really what it is. Go ahead and try it. I think it was enjoyable and worthwhile. All right, next we're going to go back to the Greek theme, and I read in June, this was a buddy read with a few people. I read Gates of Fire by Steven Pressfield. I can't remember what I gave this book. I think I gave it a 4 star. Maybe I gave it I don't remember what I gave it. If I didn't give it a 4 star, it was meant to be a 4 star. I was a little bit disappointed with this one. There was so much hype around this one. This is a lot of people's favorite historical fiction novel of all time. This follows basically the Battle of Thermopylae and the 300, the Spartans and the Persians. I think it's a bit of a frame narrative. You know, he's telling this story, and he's a captive with the Persians. This Greek captive is telling his story, how he grew up, how the Spartans became the Spartan, like why the Spartans are the way they are. And then the buildup is throughout the whole book. And then it isn't until the last like third or quarter that we really kind of get to the Battle of Thermopylae, which is okay, but it was a little bit slow. It was a little bit dry. I think stylistically this one didn't work for me as well as I'd hoped. The prose is beautiful. He's a very good writer. It just wasn't as immersive as I was hoping. There were points where I was right in ancient Greece and I was following these kids or these people, these soldiers, whoever we're following, and I'm enjoying the story. And then we get pulled out, and I think it was maybe because of the narrative choice, like the way that it's written, we get pulled out a little bit. I just felt a little distant. I never quite connected with any of the characters. There was a lot of potential here for compelling characters. Some of them were good, most of them were just whatever. I was just more disappointed with this one than I expected. I thought I'd be in the club. I'm Greek. I thought I'd be in the club of people that consider this to be one of their favorite historical fiction novels. It's a standalone. I love standalones. The perfect time period. It was like a battle that I'm familiar with, and King Leonidas, and the Spartans. Like, who doesn't love that story? But this one, just for some reason, and I'm aside from the reasons that I mentioned, it's a little hard to put my finger on. It just fell a little bit flat. That's been echoed by some friends of mine that I read it with as well. I don't know. Maybe it was the mood. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it took me a long time to read this. It took like all month to read this. I read and finished Song of Achilles. Like, I picked up Song of Achilles, finished it, and then I think read half of another book before I came back and finished this. Like, I read this one throughout the entire month. It was good, but it just wasn't an all-time favorite like I was hoping it would. Maybe let me know. Have you tried this one? What did you guys think? Then we kick off July with a read-along that I'm co-hosting with RJ Reads and the Brothers Gwyn. This is one of my all-time favorite series ever. This is The Fateful and the Fallen. We kicked off book number 1 in July, Malice. I'm a huge John Gwyn fan. You guys probably already know that. What an honor to reread this series as part of a read-along with John Gwyn's sons, Ed and Will. Having a really good time. Join us in the discussions in the Discord. Mine and also the Brothers Gwyn have their own. Discussions are happening all over the place. I was worried that this book wouldn't hold up. I was worried about my reread. Sometimes the way you remember something isn't necessarily the way that it was, or maybe it doesn't hold up. Maybe the nostalgia of something is outweighing the quality. I had none of that. I had a blast. I gave this 5 stars. And I actually don't know if I gave it 5 stars the first time around or if it was 4, 4.5. I enjoyed my reread much more. I fell in love with the characters all over again. I missed some of the characters that I had forgotten. The story ramps up throughout the whole thing. It ends on a bit, not a cliffhanger, but you sort of need to continue with the series. You want to find out what happens to certain characters and where everybody ends up and what's going to happen. This is about good and evil and angels and demons and prophecies and quest fantasy, kind of battle, sword and sorcery a little bit. There's magic, there's giants. It's so good. There's a lot of characters, a lot of places. Don't be overwhelmed. Take your time with it, and it all falls into place. John Gwyn's writing improves every book in the series. I'm a huge John Gwyn fan, and I have not read the sequel trilogy of Blood and Bone. I have it on the shelf. I've been saving that. I read all the Bloodsworn Saga books. I read those 2. We're waiting for the next one. But I saved that sequel trilogy for when I do a reread. And right now, we're running through. I'm about a third way through Valor right now in August. That's our second book. And I'm waiting to finish so that I can continue. I don't know if the read-along is going to continue, but I can't wait to read the sequel trilogy at some point after this for the first time ever. I think it takes place 150 years after, and we have some of the descendants of the characters in the first series. So anyway, I'm having a blast. My reread is going better than expected. I'm right back in the Banished Lands, having a blast, reading it with some great friends. And if you have not picked up The Faithful and the Fallen, do yourself a favor. If you like classic fantasy, if you like tropes turn on their head a bit, if you like quest fantasy, if you like grand scale battles, if you like animal companions, there's some of the best in here. If you like giants and, like I said, battles and stuff, this is a great series to pick up. It's not too late. It is August whatever right now. Go ahead, read Malice. You'll fly through it. It reads really quick, and join us for the rest of it. Continue with Valor this month. Like I said, it's not too late. Try it if you haven't. All right, next I read another Robert McCammon book. This is the 3rd Robert McCammon book that I said that I read. This is the Matthew Corbett series, book number 1, called Speaks the Nightbird. It takes place in like the 1800s or something, and it follows Matthew Corbett, who's this assistant or like secretary to a magistrate or a judge. There's this murder mystery, and it's sort of like this witch trials murder mystery. They blame this woman who they say is a witch, and there's this new flourishing town that is consumed by all these strange happenings, and they say that the witch has murdered a bunch of people and people are leaving the town. There's a lot of stuff happening. It's a really difficult book to explain, but it's like I said, it's like speculative fiction, a little bit of horror, historical fantasy. It's very interesting. It blurs the genres a little bit. I had a really good time with it. The characters are compelling. It's almost like there are no main characters. There's like one or two main characters, and then everyone else just plays such an important part to the story, and you just are so interested in the backstory of everyone. You get just enough information on everybody to make them just so memorable. And the atmosphere, the setting, it's not my typical cup of tea. This is like small town in like hundreds of years ago. It's so well done though that, you know, you're right there. It's so immersive. Like I said, when I talked about Boy's Life, his writing puts you right in the middle of everything. And it doesn't matter what the setting is, because so far every McCammon book that I've read is completely different. But the feeling that I have of being completely immersed and being able to see and picture absolutely everything, that happened in every single book that I read. I mean, that's just a common thread now for how good his writing is, and I guess how well it fits my style and the way that I like to enjoy books. So Robert McCammon has become a favorite author of mine now. I'm really excited to continue with McCammon. I don't know exactly when I'll continue with this Matthew Corbett series. It leaves everything pretty nicely wrapped up with the mystery, but it kind of leaves things open for growth and people to travel, and I'm excited to see where people end up for the next chapter of this story. But I'm not itching to continue right now. Again, it's not a setting or an atmosphere that is my typical cup of tea, and there are other series I want to finish or get into before I circle back to this one, but I'm definitely going to continue, and it won't be too long. That one I really enjoyed, and I would urge you to try any Robert McCammon book because he's so good. All right, then I had kind of a fun one. So I opened up my TBR to a patron pick. So my patrons chose a book for me to read, and I made it interesting where I said, if I choose your book, we spun a wheel and chose a book. If I choose your book and I give it 5 stars, I will give you a $25 Amazon gift card. If I give it a 4-star, I'll give you $10. And if it's less than 3, then you owe me an apology, basically. So Jane chose, she got selected and she chose Priest of Bones by Peter McLean. This is the first book in the War for the Rose Throne series. I always get that mixed up. I thought this was very, very well done. I think I gave it a 4. There were a few things that kept it from being a 5 for me, but I see so much potential in the series. I've described this one as First Law meets Lies of Locke Lamora with like Peaky Blinders vibes, and it was a really good time. It's basically about this boss of a crew, this ragtag crew, and a bunch of people end up going to this war that we don't know too much about, but I'm sure that'll get talked about more. They come back and they've lost the businesses and the income that they had before. And so he gets control of his crew again. He starts to rebuild his gang and his businesses and retake parts of the city. There's a little bit of political intrigue. I thought the writing was pretty good. It was digestible. It reads really quick. It's a nice short first entry into the series. The dialogue is really clever. Again, it reminds me of First Law, Lies of Locke Lamora, just really quick, clever dialogue. Some funny moments. There was some repetition with the internal stuff of the main character. There's a first-person narrative, and there was some issue, in my opinion, of too much telling and not enough showing. A little bit of describing events and a little bit of exposition that way of like, okay, here's what happened, here's what we're doing, instead of just showing in a different way. So I don't know. Overall, it was really good. I had a really good time with it. 4 stars. Jane, expect your Amazon gift card now that I've done a wrap up for it. I'm excited to continue. I really like the world, and because they're short reads, and because I really, again, enjoyed the characters, enjoyed the world, and I'm really intrigued to see where the story goes, I'm going to continue to prioritize it. I really enjoyed it. I don't know when I'll read the next one. Maybe not this month. Well, definitely not this month, but maybe next month I'll get back to this one. Give this one a shot if you're at all interested in the references and like the vibes that I told you of what this makes me feel and what this reminds me of. If you like any of that stuff, I think you'll enjoy this book. All right, last I had kind of a weird experience. So I started my first Guy Gavriel Kay book with a buddy read. It was The Lions of Al-Rassan. People rave about this book. I couldn't get into it, and I think that it was a little bit of a stylistic thing, a little bit of a setting thing. I just wasn't in the mood for this historical fantasy, these religious factions and stuff, and I think I just wasn't in the mood for this type of story. His writing was okay. It's beautiful writing. It's just, I think, not quite my style, or maybe not to my taste at the time. So I'm definitely going to continue with Guy Gavriel Kay. I might switch it up. I've been recommended a few other starting points. I might go back and continue with Lions of Al-Rassan. I can't actually remember how far I got, I don't know, 60, 70 pages in, and I just wasn't vibing with it. So I ended up, long story short, putting that one down, doing a not for now, as Andrew would say, from Andrew's Wizardly Reads. And then I'm doing, I switched to Feast for Crows. So I went back to A Song of Ice and Fire. That's actually the book that I'm reading right now, concurrent with Valor, book 2 in the Faithful and the Fallen series as part of the read along. So I put down Lions of Al-Rassan, no hard feelings, just kind of bowed out of that buddy read, and I'm going to get back to GGK at some point in the future. I was a little bit guilty putting that book down. With my mood, it just wasn't working. I decided to shift gears instead of forcing myself. We do this to have fun, and it was the right decision. I'm enjoying A Feast for Crows. I'm loving being back in this world again. It's become one of my favorite series of all time. It's weird because I actually don't own the books for them. I have them all on Kindle, which is probably good because they're all really fat. By the way, if you're looking to buy a Kindle or upgrade, I have a really good video about that. Maybe I'll link that one here. That's it. That's my wrap up. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what you read, and I'll talk to you guys soon on the next video.